Chinese government took Uyghur land like Tibet.
Military-style
New
vehicles
podcast.
through valleys where
Copyright
ancient
Mohammed
Silk Road caravans
Abdullah.
used to travel.
Right, it looked like this perfect, carefree escape.
Exactly. Especially at the end of spring, right before the heat sets in. The heavenly mountains and the snowy peaks of Tian Shan Lake are just packed with visitors. But the thing is, just out of frame, the reality completely fractures.
It does. Less than a mile from some of those pristine tourist routes, the smartphones and the cameras are forced off.
Because there's a parallel world there, one that the state desperately wants to keep hidden. And it's this expansive, heavily fortified landscape that is defined by internment camps, prisoner convoys, and, well, what essentially amounts to a massive targeted campaign against the region's 11 million Uyghur inhabitants.
It is honestly the ultimate architectural contradiction. You have this state-sponsored veneer of a pristine tourist paradise, and it's operating directly on top of and alongside the largest mass internment infrastructure built since World War II.
Which is just staggering to think of.
Truly, and the survivors who are emerging from this system, they aren't describing like local policing disputes. They're detailing forced sterilization, systemic torture, the literal destruction of ancient cemeteries. It's a bureaucratic machine designed to systematically wipe out the Uyghur identity, their language, and their religion.
Which brings us to the mission for this deep dive, because for a long time, this was completely hidden. But a massive collection of internal leaked documents, satellite imagery, and survivor testimonies has finally pierced the veil of secrecy surrounding Xinjiang.
Yeah, the data we have now is overwhelming.
It really is. So today, we're going to map out the exact mechanics of how a modern superpower constructs a system of total human suppression. But before we dive into the internal directives, we need to be really clear about our approach here.
Right, the neutrality check.
Exactly. The geopolitical actions we're detailing today involve highly charged, deeply contested policies by the Chinese government. These are actions frequently labeled by international bodies as crimes against humanity.
And these leaked directives we're looking at are astonishingly detailed. So as we navigate this, we want to be clear that we're not here to editorialize or, impose a specific political worldview.
Right, no taking sides. Our role is strictly to act as guides. We're just mapping out exactly what the internal bureaucracy ordered, how the surveillance architecture functions on the ground, and what the survivor testimonies reveal. The paper trails and the administrative data, they speak entirely for themselves.
We're just looking at the facts provided in the source material.
Exactly. So we invite you to step past the quick flashing headlines. We are going straight into the bureaucratic, technological, and social machinery of this event. And to really understand the scale of what is happening, we have to start with the fundamental geography. And, well, the immense economic pressure cooking beneath the surface.
You really can't understand Xinjiang without looking at the map. China is essentially demographically cut in two.
Right. The eastern seaboard has all the major urban centers, Beijing, Shanghai, and it holds the vast majority of the Han Chinese population.
But the western territory of Xinjiang is an entirely different world. The scale of it is genuinely difficult to conceptualize. It is a single region roughly 3 times the size of France.
3 times the size of France. Wow.
Yeah, and it borders 8 different countries. It sits right at the intersection of major strategic players like Russia, India, Pakistan, Afghanistan. And it's nearly 2,500 kilometers away from Beijing.
So it's incredibly isolated from the political heart of the country.
Very isolated. And historically, it has been culturally distinct. The 11 million Uyghurs are the indigenous people of that region. They're a Turkic-speaking Muslim-majority population.
So culturally, historically, linguistically, they share much more DNA with the peoples of Central Asia, right? Like the Uzbeks and the Kazakhs.
Exactly. They share way more in common with Central Asia than they do with the Han Chinese. They've been settled there for centuries, and many have never viewed themselves as fundamentally Chinese. So that cultural friction, it's always been there.
But when I look at the immense value of this land, the friction starts to look less like a cultural issue and more like a massive economic liability for Beijing.
Oh, absolutely. It is arguably their greatest strategic vulnerability. Yeah. Just look at the resources. 60% of China's total natural resources are located in these western territories.
60%?
Yeah. Xinjiang alone holds 1/3 of China's entire reserves of coal, oil, and gas.
Plus, it produces a staggering 20% of the world's cotton.
That's a huge chunk of the global supply chain right there.
It is. But the domestic resources, those are just the baseline. The real catalyst for the current crisis is global trade. In 2013, President Xi Jinping launched the Belt and Road Initiative.
Right. This is the massive infrastructure project. Yeah. Exactly. It's a colossal 10,000-kilometer rail and road network designed to connect China directly to Europe, right through Central Asia.
And if you look at a map of those new trade routes, Xinjiang is the inescapable land bridge. I mean, it's the absolute critical choke point. If you don't control Xinjiang, the trains don't run, and the economic engine of China's future global dominance just stalls out.
Right. So the central government, they realized they had to secure that choke point.
Like an aggressive corporate takeover of your most vital supply chain route. But how do they actually secure a territory that massive?
Well, their historical method has always been demographic engineering. Since 1949, the Chinese Communist Party has actively orchestrated the migration of Han Chinese into Xinjiang to dilute the Uyghur majority.
And that really accelerated recently, didn't it?
It accelerated dramatically under Xi Jinping. Millions of Han citizens were incentivized to move west. They were given the administrative roles, the high-paying industrial jobs. Today, there are almost as many Han Chinese living in Xinjiang as there are Uyghurs.
I mean, you can imagine the reaction. That sudden influx into what was traditionally Uyghur land, it sparked deep generational resentment. The Uyghurs basically viewed it as aggressive colonization. They were watching their land, their jobs, their culture being systematically marginalized by this imported middle management.
And the resistance to that marginalization, it took a lot of forms. But a small faction of the Uyghur resistance eventually radicalized and turned to violence. And this violence, it provided Beijing with the exact catalyst it needed.
Right, the spark.
Exactly. The state no longer had to rely on slow demographic assimilation.